Thanks everyone for joining us for today's conversation. I'm Darcy McConvey, Director of Capital Markets at Greybrook, and I'm here today with our CEO of Greybrook Realty Partners, Peter Politis. Peter, welcome.
Good morning. I'm assuming you've read all those books behind you on your bookshelves.
No, it's more, it gives me good feelings to pretend that I've read them actually.
Learning by osmosis, very powerful.
First chapter of each. All right, so today's recording, the plan is really to cover, quickly give an update on the COVID-19 situation and the impacts on real estate development and what we're seeing. Answer some common questions post last recording. So thanks people for submitting questions. It's important to know sort of, what's pressing so we can help tackle those questions as they come up. And one of those is, are we seeing good opportunities to buy and where are those opportunities? And maybe how's it different than normal course? So that's the plan. Hopefully you're ready to rock.
Let's do it.
All right, so the much talked about topic of COVID-19 and the pandemic is obviously very much a fluid and evolving situation. So we talked a couple of weeks ago with Sasha about the impacts in our experience in sort of the real estate development sector. So Peter, as a guy who spends all of your time on the ground and understanding the market, who's buying, who's selling, trades, who's on, who's off, and the work being done. So a few weeks, post our first conversation, what are we seeing and experiencing now across our projects that are in the various stages? So we kind of separated into planning stage, the construction phase, and then those projects that are in sort of sales and or occupancy. So I'll throw that one over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's a super dynamic situation because any week, any period of 1 week, I can't say that we started Monday and then ended Friday without some bit new of information where a little something different happened or changed or some version of that. And usually for the good, ultimately. But let's start with planning. The planning has materially slowed down in terms of our ability to actually go through projects and files. Now, the good thing is that the people in the various municipalities, for the most part, are actually working. They're providing us with comments on applications and they're doing so. However, the city of Toronto, as an example, was not built to have thousands of workers working from home, remotely connecting to VPN servers and clouds. Like their system isn't built to handle that kind of traffic. So they've had to create systems and processes where certain departments and divisions access stuff, and certain ones are more essential than others. And that's created a bit of a complication in dealing with moving these applications forward. I can tell you that, at least in the GTA, there are statutory limitations from which a municipality has to respond to an application or a set of comments. Those time statutes have been put on pause at this point in time. So what that means is if the city had to get back to us in 90 days, they don't have that 90-day window. Now, they are getting back to us, and maybe not every department that they can, but they are moving these things forward the best that they can, and they're creating new protocols. So, for example, the city of Oakville was accepting no new applications at all whatsoever, even to put them in there, notwithstanding the time statutes don't start, because they don't want anyone coming down in person. Well, they're in the middle of creating an online portal that they hope that in the next, 5 to 14 days, potentially will be ready and up for doing some of those things. So everyone's adapting and really trying to do their best. Now, does that mean that we're going to be delayed afterwards? Are they going to use their full statute time that they have, even though we've received 10% or 80% of the comments, depending where? I mean, we don't have the answer to that, but I can tell you that I probably never before in my career seen more of a sense of togetherness, and we're all fighting the same problem, trying to move the same things forward. Like it's not adversarial. Like it's all of humankind is in the same spot here, trying to move things forward.
Which is huge, right? Like I think we kind of spoke about that last time, but that's hopefully one of the most positive takeaways when we sort of roll out of this is the collaborative nature and even I guess some of the technology that's now being implemented, and hopefully that's one of the things that remains, right?
I think that it's kind of the evolution, and part of what this pandemic is doing is maybe thrusting us into new ways of thinking about things and doing things, forcing us to do it quicker than we ever would have otherwise as a society across many different things. And some of those changes might remain as part of normal course implementation going forward. I can tell you, my wife Sophia is a family doctor, and she wasn't really allowed to do a heck of a lot of telehealth before now. And now everybody who's a non-emergency is done through telehealth. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that going to stay? Is there some version of all or nothing that can maybe help ease some of the burdens on the healthcare system? Maybe, right?
Yeah. Similar story over here. Actually, my wife's a therapist, and she's, can do online therapy, right? So, and you just are forced to adapt, which is interesting, and probably for the better ultimately. So then if we flip gears into sort of that construction phase, like I know historically we're talking sort of a range of 60 to 80% sort of capacity or efficiency depending on the site. Would you say that's still the case?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really like everything. It's the devil's in the details. So one question that I got a lot when Premier Ford made his new announcement on whether this construction essentially being shut down, people thought that most recent announcement meant that construction could no longer continue. That's actually not the case. They made a distinction amongst things that have an above grade permit or a foundational permit for the houses, and things that have, let's say, not yet started at a much earlier stage. So the things that we have an above grade permit on a condo or a foundational permit for a house, we're building normal course. And that efficiency can range from, I would say, 60 to some stuff in the US, which we'll talk about more, is maybe closer to 95% efficiency based on where we're at in the stage of the project, meaning, we're pouring concrete. Other things like we're finishing the interior of units might be a little slower based on new protocols on how we live and work. And I think that's very important for everyone to understand. Like, we are lowering our efficiency because we're doing it in the safest way possible. What we can't have is the people that have to go to work every day because they're essential workers be putting themselves or others at risk. We have an elevator hoist that brings people up in our condos, and we used to have 10 or 12 people in that hoist. You might have 2 or 3 people. You might have floor mats in the hoist telling people they have to stand on opposite corners of this thing to show them where they should stand. We have hand washing equipment. All this stuff evolved. I can tell you that early on during this closures, even before Ford's most recent announcement, one of the drywall contractors said, listen, we're not going to come to work anymore. We're pulling off our sites, all of our sites that we're on. And that lasted for about a week. And then they ended up coming back. They came back in a safer way. And obviously, protocols were created. Hand washing stations were created. I can tell you that we had a hand washing station at one point, and now we have barricades in between all the hand washing stations to make sure people are, and other sanitizing ways. Like, every day we're creating new ways and policies and procedures to make sure it's safe. Mechanical, electrical, some trades said we're pulling off site. Then 7 or 10 days later, once we created some protocols and figured out some ways to keep people working, they came back on site. So it's really a very dynamic thing. Now, the stuff that hasn't started, like we have a number of sites that we're planning on servicing. Servicing in Toronto is really the putting in the underground pipes for the sewers and the building of the roads. It's seasonal work in Toronto because of winter. And right now we can't hold those servicing permits. And the answer is, when speaking to the various public officials, they're not concerned that the people working in one heavy machinery by themselves pose a risk, but how do they get to work? A lot of these people don't have their own cars. They carpool, they take breaks together, they go to Tim Hortons together, they go to wherever, not to plug a certain coffee chain. Whatever it is, these are the layers of complexity that goes into, why can't we reopen tomorrow? What are the protocols that we need? There's no, I talk to our guys all the time, whether it's on the construction site or the asset management side, anywhere. There's no glass behind my desk that says like break glass in case of pandemic emergency and revealing a manual. This doesn't exist.
That's your second promotion. You promoted to now healthcare, doctor visit, and Tim. So yeah, no, like, obviously you scrap your way to find an answer, right? And implement protocols, implement processes as needed to sort of keep the ball rolling. So you know, it sounds like that's kind of been fluid and actually maybe evolving to the better, and you know, there may be some light at the end of the tunnel, and you know, things are changing in kind of rapidly, day to day, week to week. How about on the sales side, you know, around pricing and absorptions? What are we seeing sort of in that sort of third stage of a development?
Yeah, I mean, there's really a handful of things to talk about on the sales side. There's new sales, and then there's the closing of current inventory, and there's what the market is doing now. So I guess there's two separate things, and one is in terms of new launches. But on the pre-sale side, I can tell you that we launched Greybrook in partnership with Tribute Communities, launched a condo the very first week of March 6th or 7th, like a few days before the shutdown happened, where we launched condos for sale at Artistry, a project kitty corner from the AGO. So kind of like Dundas and McCall, Dundas and University area. We sold over 220 units firm at over $1,450 a square foot. That all firmed up during the lockdown. That all went through that period. So people who are investing in real estate don't look at, I'm buying this for a 30-day investment. I'm buying it for a 3, 5, 7-year horizon. And we can talk about that in terms of the investment, the opportunity. So during that period, and then for the first couple of weeks, we saw other sites have a lot of activity. And that was probably brokers that had started having these conversations with people, and sales were consummated. We were doing things virtually. We had virtual tours. We had different DocuSign stuff that was coming. Like, all these things were happening in order to make the sales. Now, we've seen our sales velocity slow down to a very minimum number across our portfolio now. And one of the reasons I think that is not just because it's hard for people to transact, but they're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. And they think that, you know, if I wait another week, 2 or 3, I might be able to have more of a traditional sales experience, or more of a traditional client-facing experience, whether you're a broker or someone selling these people. And I think they're waiting a little bit there. Now, something that I found out yesterday, which was amazing, is Lantera launched a limited release of a new condo. Fully virtual, first launch that I know of, fully closed. It launched at the beginning of April. So, you know, now we're at 3.5 weeks into April. They launched, it was at Eglinton and Royal York, just east of Royal York.
Yeah.
They released 128 units, so a relatively limited release, all to brokers. And they've sold and firmed up on 76% of them.
Wow.
All during this period, all virtual. No one went to a sales center, not an in-person meeting. So in order to firm up 76% of them, they've probably sold some version of nearly all of them. As you go through a rescission period, you tend to lose some people here and there. So,
and how much do you think, you know, like, one, it's fascinating, and I think it'd be some information that would surprise a lot of people is that, you know, everyone closed on almost 100% of the units, right? So how much of that is attributable to the fact that it is a longer term hold, most likely, when people are buying real estate, but also, you know, where interest rates are?
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking it to the next stage, so forget the sales and marketing, you're talking about the actual closing of units that we sold. I mean, one thing, we have a condo unit in Liberty Village that's occupying right now, or will start occupying any week now. And anybody who says there's closing risk there, I welcome it. We average $575 a square foot for those units, right? So people's ability to close there, it's going to be very strong. I can tell you that we've had closings going on in multiple sites right now, which means people have moved in, already occupied, and are now closing and getting a mortgage. And we have not had a single person during this period say, I can't get a mortgage, I can't close, I don't want to close. It's actually cheaper and easier for these people, assuming they haven't lost their jobs or been one of those people that have been furloughed or have those kinds of situations. If they have a stable income, this house today is cheaper for them to own and close on than it was 8 weeks ago.
Sure.
And that is something that, you know, some people might ask for another day or two, like logistics, moving things around, you know, it's a little harder today. But we haven't seen people asking for 30, 60, 90-day extensions. We haven't seen people saying, sorry, I can't close, take back your townhouse in this case. We've seen all these people closing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Sales are made years ago.
So I guess sort of in the light of time, like that's a great summary as you kind of walk through, the various stages. And to be honest, it sounds relatively positive, and not to say that, there's not a lot of uncertainty embedded in this going forward, which there is. But, if we flip gears and switch gears and maybe talk a little bit about, some of the questions, I think the most pressing question for most people is, well, there's twofold. One, how are things doing, which I think you've addressed well. And two, are you seeing good investment opportunities with everything that's going on with COVID? And are there distressed sellers, or is it sort of business as usual? If not, where are the opportunities? So, like, in terms of opportunity and go forward, what are you seeing?
Sure. I mean, I can say unequivocally that we are out there looking for opportunities within the market today that we think meets our risk parameters or our risk reward thing. I mean, we're always out there, but we're not out of the market. We're actively looking, and we actually are actively circling a handful of things as we speak. A very anecdotal story to tell you is there's a developer who ran into some trouble, had nothing to do with COVID. It was pre-COVID. And the sites have gone into receivership. They haven't been properly listed for sale yet. And one of the sites in particular is like a AAA site.
Yeah.
Which usually means it's going to be very expensive. And we had 9 of our partners separately call me and say, hey, do you see this? Oh my God, it's great. You think we can pick it up for 50 cents on the dollar, 70 cents on the dollar, 80 cents on the dollar? And I just laughed and I said, you're like the 9th person that's just called me, and all of you have the ability to do it. There's many other people who I haven't even spoken to that have the ability to do it. The distress situation for opportunities comes when the market itself is weak or unwilling to transact.
Right.
So fortunately or unfortunately, the development community in the GTA is very well financially healed, the big guys. And there's always people that are in trouble. Like all the time, people think that because times are good, there aren't people who are struggling. There are people that are struggling. And a 30, 60, 90-day delay or whatever this is going to turn into COVID today, and I'm not talking about what it will be in the future because we can get to what that may or may not be, is not going to knock a very strong, financially well-heeled industry on its side where everything becomes distressed. Now, does that mean there aren't no opportunities in its business course as usual? No. I think that today, what we're doing, what a lot of people are doing is saying, listen, I have the ability to transact and buy, but I want to be compensated for giving you, the vendor, certainty during an uncertain time. That could mean a price reduction. It could mean better terms, whether it's payment or length of interest VTBs or interest-free VTBs or whatever, or some combination of both those things, where if you want to transact now and have the certainty to transact, you're going to have to reward us for transacting. It doesn't mean I'm buying it for 50 cents on the dollar, but I'm sure not buying it for the highest price ever paid for something in an area. I'm sure not buying it on the same terms and conditions as 8 weeks ago. And if you're, as a vendor, saying to me, I'm only going to transact like that, then okay, then you're not going to transact with us, and probably not with a lot of people, and you're going to sit there and wait, because some of these guys have held land, forget 5 years or 10 years, held it 50, 20, 30, 40 years. So hold it another 6 months. I mean, Darcy, I remember how many conversations did we have, like literally you and I, in 2017, when the low-rise market went down, in some cases, 15 to 30%, depending on the sub-market. And we said, okay, let's go out and find good opportunities to buy land so that we know there's real demand, we know there's all these things that come to Toronto. And what happened? Transactions just slowed down.
Right.
Vendors didn't sell. They weren't willing to sell for 30% less, even if that was the realistic case at that point in time.
Yeah, like I think that kind of speaks to, everyone's looking for an opportunity, like in the public market, something dropped, 40%, so now's a good time to buy. But I think there's a couple things. To your point, if people have held land for 5, 10, 15 years and are reasonably well capitalized, another 6 months is on the total timeline is a relatively small portion of it. And it's not going to be their primary source of liquidity, right? If they need liquidity, it's going to come from somewhere else. And then on the flip side is you've got a lot of well-heeled developers that have done well historically, are well capitalized. And so that kind of speaks to the stability in a way of the market. So one, it's not the primary source of liquidity. Two, you've got well-capitalized developers that are there. So it's a stable market, and that's one of the things about development generally is that, you know, over the long term, it's quite stable if you're in a market, especially like Toronto.
One of the unique opportunities that we've been trying to, I don't want to say take advantage of, but to try to see if it makes business sense for us is we know that there are developers that prior to this were in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these sites have gone into formal receivership, and they're now going through formal receivership sales. And I definitely think there's less bidders out there. Like, for sure, there's less people bidding on things, which means it's a little bit of a better opportunity to buy potentially. And again, terms, price, some combination of that than it was 8 weeks ago. But the vendor or the receiver is always going to have the opportunity to say, I don't want to take the price, right? If it gets to the point where it's so, we're not talking about a little bit less than they thought. We're talking about big gaps. They have the ability to hold off the transaction. So we're circling some of those things where we feel we're offering a good market value and a good risk reward for where we're at in the world, and a fair offer to the vendors, and fair terms to us. But I can tell you that the days of, you know, no diligence or 30-day diligence and quick closing, all that, like those are not, that's not the tenor of any vendor right now. Even if they don't want to adjust price, they're not telling you, sorry, you can only have this or you can only have that.
Right.
If they want to transact, they have to be reasonable. And the reason that's important is because it's not a line. Like, we do have to coordinate with a lot of people. We're all working from home, and it's not necessarily as quick as efficient. And we want to take advantage of, because we have the capital and the ability to transact right now, if we can be rewarded for us doing some of these things, we want to be.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So, you know, I'm conscious of time. I know, you know, when we do say, hey, we're looking for listener feedback, you know, one of the feedback items is always, you don't let it go too long, as insightful as you are. So
I thought that was just Sasha. Like, Sasha goes too long, but I can go as many hours as you guys want.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to no comment that one, but I think it could be either one of you. But I guess that, you know, as we sort of think about winding it up, is there anything that you want to highlight or thought that you want to leave with listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head when you opened up by saying everything's a day by day, it's new day by day, and we evaluate everything day by day. And I think that's probably one of our organizational strengths, is that I don't care if the plan was made yesterday or made 5 years ago. We're constantly, our entire team on the asset management side and our development partners are reviewing every decision we make on a real-time basis and making the right decisions that for today, and the right risk-reward decisions and the right maximization of profit decisions. And this is a very active managed portfolio and business. As slow-moving as development might seem to the average investor out there, every day there's things and decisions that are made and timelines that are set that go to the ultimate success of the project. And that's what we're focusing on doing today. And that includes our current stuff and for new opportunities. So we're being very active in that. And if markets change, we'll adapt. And if markets change for the better, we'll adapt. And they, oddly enough, they both need adaptations, right? It's very rare that nothing changes for a prolonged period of time. Things either get better or they get worse. And we're built and geared and constantly thinking around what does that mean for each one of our individual projects.
Sure. You know what? And it always strikes me how, to your point, it's a great point, is development on the surface looks like, you know, a turtle moving across, like very slow moving, but the reality is it's extremely complex. There's so many different facets, there's so many different stakeholders, and you layer in a time like this and it just makes it, you know, that much more complex with not being able to do things like you typically do. So, you know, really appreciate your insights. I hope for everyone listening, they too appreciate it, and there's some nuggets that can take away. And, you know, the point of these sessions are really to be transparent, which hopefully, you know, that transparency parlays into, you know, easing maybe some uncertainty or some uncertain thoughts for people, and then helping give some clarity into, you know, how we're looking into the future. So for anyone listening, you know, please send us your feedback. Any questions we'll address directly or in these sessions. And really the point of these sessions is to provide people with sort of updates, what we're experiencing, how we're managing it. But most importantly, You know, I think that as a Greybrook staff member, we're very grateful to have deemed an essential service in this time, you know, on the construction side. So we're thankful for that. And we're very thankful for the frontline workers, whether it's grocery store employees, civil servants, healthcare, for the heroic work they're doing on behalf of everyone, really. So, you know, I guess I'll wrap it up on that, but we appreciate your time, Peter, and to everyone out there, thank you.
Everybody stay safe, healthy, hug your families. Talk soon.
Take care, thanks.